policy.
Next policy is 3362, zero tolerance for discriminatory and harassing misconduct by staff and students.
Questions, comments, board members? Hearing none? Yeah, okay, Ms. Sprague.
Just one quick, I think there's a word that's out of alignment on line 14. I think it should read ancestry, pregnancy, political affiliation, and or marital status. You've got a political or affiliation.
You're correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Verbiage change then noted. Other
Also,
comments?
I think in the retaliation section, we'll go back to that to clean up as we did with the other one.
Board members? Everybody comfortable with that? Great. Did you have another question, Ms. Lichter?
Yes. For the record, the board was sent a policy, a model anti-bullying policy for all schools, and I think the language in this would be great. So my recommendation is to swap the existing policy for the one that was sent to us. I do have some questions related to this, and this goes along with the agenda that I'm concerned about.
Before you do that,
Yeah.
can I just ask how other people
Yep,
would feel
absolutely.
about
Thank you.
swapping it out? Because
I'm not sure what she's asking.
she's asking to swap it out for a policy that was sent to board members in an email.
It's a model anti-bullying policy that we were all sent, and hopefully all reviewed.
By who?
Richard Mast.
No. I'm
No,
not
what?
in
You
agreement
didn't
with
read
that.
it, or no?
I read it. I'm not in agreement with swapping it out.
Okay.
Mr. Terry?
I think we should give that to the superintendent and her staff and let them look at it.
Ms. Donalds?
I unfortunately did not get that email yesterday. I know my name's on it. I checked that, but I looked all through my email and did not see it come through. In fact, it was resent to me, and I still didn't get it. So I don't know what filter is on there that I can't seem to get that email.
Well,
but
that's an email issue that
I
we'll
would
have
like
have
to
staff
have
look
an
into.
opportunity to look at it.
And I don't
before I
feel
make
we should
comment.
change the policy, so it seems like the direction is not to change the policy, but maybe if there's additional language that people want to discuss.
Well,
Sure.
back to my concerns earlier. Last week, there was a gentleman who came and spoke to the board about GLSEN, and he mentioned that they are giving safe kits to students in our school, providing safe stickers. So I wanted to find out what was going on with that first, because
Did you talk to the superintendent about it?
I sent an email and she said she would let me know about it, but I didn't get any
Okay.
specifics. So.
Oh, okay, so let me be very clear on that. I did send an email back and said I would talk to you Tuesday. You didn't come to your briefing today, so I didn't get to cover it with you
Because my
today.
son has strep throat.
Doesn't. I'm just saying that
Okay.
I mentioned that I would do it, and didn't know if you were or were not coming. That's fine. So the answer about the GLSEN is this. So we have had many different years of schools that have had different organizations. One is the gay and straight lesbian grouping that's been at different high schools and different club sponsors. Sometimes we have more, sometimes we have less. I think it depends on who the student body is there. The GLSEN gentleman that came and spoke, we did have in both the spring and then this summer when the teachers came back with our counselors, we had spoken to our different counselors via district meetings to make sure that we are remembering that we do have a cross-section of students and that we should always be sensitive to those students. So what we have had is over the course of years, again, different schools having different situations, always though working with counselors to know. We've had things that have had organizations then with the parents, the PFLAG group that have also provided different informations to our schools, to our counselors. From there, what we have also had is that we've had things as easy as stickers sometimes that are used most heavily, probably as a generality, with our counselors that are known as safe spots. So the kids that might be more wanting to have those kind of opportunities. And then also at times you would see a safe sticker, for example, at a teacher's room that may have been the club sponsor. So it varies school by school, and it has been around different years, different times. So what we did say is that staff is going to be sure that that gentleman comes in and sits so that they can understand, because the understanding almost was from the board meeting the other day, we don't address this, and that is not an accurate statement. So we want to be sure to, like when people want to help our kids, make sure that they have accurate information, not just information that they seem to hear. So that's the high level of where we're at with the GLSEN, and not just GLSEN. Again, we've had the Gay Straight Alliance around for many different years.
So here's my concern, and Madam Chair, I know you asked if I had spoke to Dr. Patton about this, and this is one of my concerns, that things are often discussed behind closed doors, which is why I think this is important we have this conversation out in the open. Last week I was told that a gentleman who's with the Liberty Day Institute or whatever, he is wanting to distribute constitutions to fifth graders, and I was told that he is part of a special interest group, and it sounded like this wasn't going to happen. And so I don't see how what's the difference then? That to me, GLSEN sounds like a special interest group and would violate policy 9700. So why I'm bringing this up is because he mentioned a steering committee that he created, and I want to know, are district officials part of that steering committee that he mentioned?
Well, let's look at the
steering
policy.
committee?
No. He had mentioned he came here, spoke, and I went back and watched his statements to make sure I was accurate when I spoke about this tonight. He said he created a steering committee, and I'm just asking questions. I'm not accusing anybody. I just want to know if his steering committee could be totally separate from the district, but I want to know if district officials are on the steering committee, because he made it very clear that he was concerned that our district didn't have policies addressing transgender and sexual orientation.
So, to my knowledge, we're not part of any GLSEN steering committee. I've not heard of that. Don't have, to my knowledge, is it a district steering committee that we have on that topic? For
I think
that,
we need to
have a
focus on the
diversity
policy.
committee that Mr. Fishbane has helped with us over the years.
But
That's as close as we
part
get.
of this policy is the bigger issue that I was bringing up, that there's a clear agenda here, and I don't.
What would you like to see changed?
I would like to see.
Hold on, let me finish. What would you like to see changed in the policy? Because that's what we're looking at this point. If you have a concern, if you could make a recommendation for what you would like to see changed, we can certainly consider
The
those
model
changes.
policy addresses all inclusive students. It's not about labeling our children. It's all inclusive, and I think.
Are you okay with that in the policy? All inclusive?
Well, I would like to throw out the existing policies, what I've recommended, and this model.
We're not going to do that, but we'd certainly like your input.
Are you deciding that, or is the board deciding that?
No, a majority of the board would like to move in the direction of using this policy, but taking your input to see if we might be able to alleviate some of the concerns that you have.
Well, I've expressed the concerns. I do not think the policy needs to have that language in there. The sexual
language?
orientation and transgender identity.
Okay, and so let me just go with other board members and the precedent that we've set with the previous policy, which we said will include sexual orientation and or transgender identity. So either we need to all agree on taking it out completely or leaving it in. I'd just like some direction from and excuse me, religion/religious beliefs. Thank you, Mr. Fishbane. Other board members? Thoughts? Yes.
I have a question, and
Well, let's focus on this
It's-
piece first.
I have a question about this
Oh, okay.
piece, because we have a lot of crossing over, and I understand the argument about the equal opportunity employment in relation to the lawsuits and the laws that were put forth. We have this zero tolerance for the discriminatory and harassing misconduct by staff and students that we're looking at right now that falls under the staff. We also have a students one which mirrors it, 5517, with their
Let's go back to your
pretty much
initial
the same.
question. And
But we
that-
also have a bullying
Can we go
policy,
back to your
which
initial
Ms.
question for a
Lichter-
second?
Yeah, sure.
And that is zero tolerance for discriminatory and harassing misconduct. This also is a staff policy, and yet this says staff and students. So perhaps we need to only
We can
include-
delete the reference to students in the title of this policy, and we can delete the reference to staff in the title of the other policy.
Great, okay.
Could we just have Mr. Dean address one more thing with regard
Sure.
to this piece? Ian?
Sure. Is there a reason why we should not?
No, he's got another suggestion with regards to differentiating between students and staff on these two policies.
Okay.
Similar.
Yeah, it could be because we have our different series of policy numbers, 3,000 series being for staff or employees and 5,000 for students. At some point in history, these two policies were built to mirror each other. So each of the policy includes language on both employees and employee applicants and also student and student applicants. So it is possible that we could separate those so that the staff information would be included in the staff
Well, I think given the
policy
discussion
and
that we
student
had
in the student.
earlier, for clarification on behalf of the board members who brought this up, that we should probably eliminate students in the staff policy and eliminate staff in the student policy. So that'll be clearer for us.
I think that makes sense, and it actually goes to my further point, is that this is also, quote, bullying, and Mr. Fishbane alluded to earlier that we have both this and a bullying policy. When it comes to the student side, can we combine the bullying with the zero tolerance for discriminatory and harassing misconduct by
Well,
students?
let's take a look at that when we
Well,
get to
before,
that
let me just
policy.
make one point, because she asked a question that we had to draft, Mrs. Donalds, by state statute and rule, a separate bullying statute policy anyway. And with that is also an accompanying administrative procedure, because the statute and DOE rule wanted to know what the procedures would be. So in essence, the state and the legislature laid it out for us. So that has to stay. That's linked to a requirement. And that came long after these were put into effect in 2000. So you have
We
three
can't
things.
combine them under a bullying policy to continue to meet the state requirements?
My view, I don't think so. We've tried to the best of our ability to include the concept of harassment in bullying. But the idea of discrimination, such as in the workplace, has its own meaning as well. So that's why we have to be careful before we start the merger process.
So these policies are harassment because of discrimination, and bullying is bullying because of no reason at all? Is that correct?
No reason at all.
I mean, bullying just for whatever bullying. You don't name. Do you name the?
If you take a look at the bullying,
I'm sorry if I'm bothering you, but we have so many policies. It's ridiculous. I don't know how anybody could follow this if
I
it's
don't know
not your
why-
full-time job. I'm just trying to consolidate things
why are
to
you
make
getting
sense.
angry at me? What if I said
No, I'm
to
not
you?
angry at you. I'm angry at the unnecessary.
Go ahead,
expressions
Mr.
over here.
Fishbane. Do you want to
What
respond?
we did, and we had in 2010 or 11, I don't recall, the bullying became a big state issue. As a consequence, legislation was passed, and we had to now develop a whole set of bullying policies based on statute and accompanying procedures. Now, what we did in there, which was also in alignment with state rule, is at the time my sense was, well, this looks to me a little bit like harassing conduct based upon my knowledge of that area, and we included harassment. Actually, the state wanted that. So we were left with a multiplicity of policies under Title VII directives, Title IX, and so you do have an element of overlap. That's accurate, but we're constrained to follow what the legislature tells us, what the law tells us on that. But we can't really just unilaterally combine them all, because areas of Title VII misconduct for employees would not fall necessarily within a bullying policy that might be more oriented toward students. So I understand that it's troubling and confusing, but what we've tried to do is be distinct by keeping them separate. And yet, if there was, maybe this answers your question, a bullying event occurs, a harassing event occurs, and they overlap, and the person who has taken that step to create the event actually is going to be subject to 2 policy rules that could, in essence, be a violation. So that's a serious issue. I mean, it really allows for enforcement. I wish I could answer your question why there's so many laws out there. I can't. I mean, we have to honor these things and put them into place.
Yeah,
I don't mind you asking the question. However, I would like to stick to the agenda and the policies at hand this evening. It's okay to ask the question, and we can certainly look at it at a future work session, but I really think we need to focus on these
Right. It is
first readings of policies.
Right. And I was referring to the first reading of the policy related to students, which we just talked about because we're going to split the students off of the policy that we're currently on. They do overlap because this is the staff one, this is the student one, and we just talked about how we're going to split them up. So, and the student one is the one I was referring to combining with the bullying, not the staff one.
Okay, and I think Mr. Fishbane answered that question. Did you have any other questions or concerns on this particular policy? And I go back to the language because we agreed on the language in the previous policy and to add religious beliefs. So I think we need to move forward in having the same language in this policy. Would others not agree?
I agree.
Okay.
This also has the retaliation paragraph that references the board, so we need to add the board and the district
To that also.
personnel as well.
Okay.
And there is actually, just to bring this, have some closure to it, my understanding, and Ian, just clarify if I'm correct or not, within our bullying policy, we've also tried to place a retaliation provision so that we're consistent right on through. Is
Thank
that
you
accurate?
That's
for that
correct.
clarification.
Yes.
Thank you.